through 2029 Housing Element Update, submitted by Ursula Luna Reynosa, Director of Community Development. And then we received 86 emails regarding the high-density housing as of 1:30 this afternoon. Anything received after that, we will be posting. They will be posted tomorrow on the website.
Thank you. So the floor is yours.
Good afternoon,
Thank
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. I want to start by acknowledging the difficult decision that will be coming before the City Council related to the housing element. The precursor to that decision has been years of work on a very difficult task, and that is how to accommodate Huntington Beach's RHNA, the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, that has been assigned to us by SCAG, of over 13,000 new units in an already built-out city. How are we going to accommodate 13,000 units in an already built-out city? The task, when we received it, felt monumental, and as we've gone through it, it hasn't been easy. There's been a lot of difficult choices. Do I agree with our RHNA number? No, I don't. Do I agree with the methodology to determine the RHNA? No, I don't. In fact, Huntington Beach was one of the few cities to appeal our RHNA to SCAG, and we were unsuccessful in that appeal. There is a legislative process to look at RHNA reform, and the city staff is going to be very proactive in that discussion. It's just starting at the SCAG level and ultimately will go up to the state level. I think that we will need to work very collaboratively with the League of California Cities and other multi-jurisdictional efforts. I think we'll have the most success if we band together, and I think many cities feel the same way about the RHNA process. That RHNA reform is absolutely needed. That doesn't help us for today. It doesn't help us with where the City Council is at in this particular moment. And we're going to talk about the importance of having a certified housing element. And it's a difficult decision, and there are trade-offs. So the bottom line is it has been a seemingly impossible task to accommodate the RHNA without impacting segments of town. And with most difficult land use decisions, there are absolutely trade-offs. So today's study session, we will provide a high-level background to frame the purpose of the housing element from the state's perspective, what we're required to do to comply, the rules that HCD has imposed related to site analysis, and some options will be provided to the City Council for discussion. So we'll start with a staff presentation, then there will be clarifying questions from the City Council, followed by public comment, and concluded with City Council discussion. There will be no decision made today. There's no vote that the City Council will be taking today. So with that, I would like to introduce the team that has been working on this. In particular, Jennifer Villasenor, who is our resident housing element expert. She's worked on the past 2 cycles and has worked really closely with Nicole Abe, our housing analyst, to train Nicole to become the new face of the housing element for Huntington Beach, a job that I'm not sure she wants. And Alyssa Matthews is a planner within the department that has worked closely with our environmental consultant on the CEQA analysis. Steve Holtz and Charles Kovac from our housing division are also here as well and have been supportive. So with that, I believe Nicole is going to be kicking off the presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, or good afternoon, Mayor Del Glaze and council members. The item we'll discuss this afternoon is the 2021 through 2029 Housing Element Update and its associated implementation actions to accommodate the RHNA. So first, there are 2 main components of the Housing Element Update overall. First is the Housing Element document itself. This is a planning and policy document, and it's a mandated element or chapter of the city's general plan. The implementation actions of the housing element are what is necessary to accommodate the city's plan for housing through zoning. The implementation actions propose primarily zoning overlays that don't change the base zoning designations of a property. So here is an overview of the public outreach that occurred as part of the housing element update process. It kicked off in the spring of 2021 We had a joint planning commission and city council study session. We also did 3 community meetings, an online survey, and a Spanish language outreach event. The online survey garnered over 2,000 responses. 10 of those responses were in Spanish. Our consultant even said that this was by far the highest number of responses they've seen for either English or Spanish. The first draft of the housing element document was published in October 2021 on the city website for a 30-day public review and comment period. The methods we used for advertising included postings on the city website and social media, email and direct mail to interested parties. We had ads on the electronic marquees at Golden West College, and we also put out doorknob hangers in Oakview community to advertise the Spanish language outreach event. Each of the 4 subsequent revised documents were published on the website as well, and an email notification was sent out to the Housing Element Update subscription list. We also maintained a page for the Housing Element Update on the website and sent out emails regarding meetings and public input opportunities to the email subscription list too. The housing element is one of the 7 required elements of the general plan, and it's updated every 8 years. The state of California reviews all of the housing elements, and in this case, the state agency reviewing them is called HCD, which stands for Department of Housing and Community Development. In order for HCD to approve the housing element, the city must complete its RHNA implementation programs simultaneously with the housing element adoption. On September 30th, the city received a letter from HCD indicating that our housing element document is in substantial compliance with housing element law. And the main benefit of HCD certification is the presumption of a legally adequate housing element. HCD has a vast enforcement authority. They can refer jurisdictions that are out of compliance to the Attorney General for further review. There's a lot of potential penalties like loss of local land use authority, loss of building permit issuance, fines up to $100K per month. We'll discuss those topics a bit more later. Eligibility for many state funding programs also require compliant housing element. That includes programs like CDBG, the Local Housing Trust Fund, and the Caltrans Sustainable Communities Grant. The housing element document itself has a few different sections. It includes a population and housing profile of the city, evaluates constraints to constructing housing and resources available for housing development as well. It evaluates the city's existing programs and policies from the 5th cycle document, and it also identifies sites that are appropriate to accommodate the city's RHNA allocation and provides policies, programs, and quantified objectives to achieve the city's housing goals. As a sample of the data in the community profile section, this table shows that between 2010 and 2019, there have been slight changes in household types in the city. The overall number of households has increased, and householders ages 65 and over has increased by just about 3% over that time. This section also has a lot of data and info on special needs groups. About 42% of all households in the city include a senior that is age 60 and over. About 10% of households are seniors who live alone. 9.5% of households include a person that has at least one disability. Single-parent households are almost 5%, with female-headed single-parent households comprising 3.5% of that total. Also, about 8% of the population are people living in poverty. So here's an example of the income thresholds for Orange County. The area median income for a 4-person household is $119,100 in 2022. An extremely low-income household of 4 people would make less than about $40,650. A moderate income household of 4 people makes up to $142,900. Above moderate income is anything over that $142,000 number. On the next slide, we have some info about employment and average wages that we'll talk about, but examples of those wages in a household, as you can see here, a married school teacher and sales worker with 2 children that have about $123,000 annual income would be categorized as a moderate income household. So the community profile also talks about employment in the city. The top employment sectors in the city are education, healthcare, and social assistance at 20%. Next is professional scientific management and administrative services at 13%, and that's followed by retail and manufacturing at 11% each. Local tourism is about 10%, with fields in arts, entertainment, rec, and accommodation, and food services. Finance, insurance, and real estate are about 8% of employment. And again, the Orange County AMI is $119,100 for a family of 4. As you can see, the table shows that mean salaries by occupation in Orange County. The only 2 occupations that pay more than the AMI of $119,000 are management and legal professions. The city's largest sectors, such as education, sales and retail, and food services, pay below the county AMI. The community profile section also provides a snapshot on the cost of housing in the city. Overall, the average cost of a rental unit has increased by about 31% from 2014 to 2020. Lower-income households can't afford market rate units without substantial cost burdens. Moderate income households at the upper levels of the income category can generally afford market rate rentals. In 2019, the median value of a for-sale home in the city was about $771,000. All income groups could not afford market rate ownership without substantial cost burdens. So to summarize the community profiles section, who in Huntington Beach needs affordable housing? This would include people that work here, like teachers and hospitality workers, but can't afford to live here. About 82% of the primary jobs in Huntington Beach are held by people living outside of the city that commute in to the city for work. Affordable housing can also be needed by special needs households like seniors or disabled persons and single parents, or also children of longtime Huntington Beach residents that are newer in the workforce. So that said, what does affordable housing in Huntington Beach look like? Here are photos of Cape Ann and Promenade. These are 2 affordable projects located in the Holly Seacliff Specific Plan area. As you can see, they have high-quality architecture and nice landscaping, well-kept-up landscaping as well. The left photo is Oceana in this slide. This is a 100% affordable rental project in the Beach Ettinger Corridor Specific Plan. They also have amenities for residents. Sorry, that's the right photo. The right photo is Oceana. They have amenities like a barbecue area and patio cover. I think there's a pool back there. The left photo is Bowen Court. This is on Lake Street. It's a 100% very low income rental for seniors. And you can see in this photo as well, it has nice landscaping, manicured landscaping out front, and high quality architecture as well. Next, we are on to the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing discussion, or AFFH for short. This is a new requirement for the 6th cycle, the 2021 through 2029 planning period. And it was put in place by AB 686. It requires jurisdictions to identify sites for housing development in a manner that's consistent with its duty to affirmatively further fair housing. These AFFH requirements have been difficult to understand and apply because they are so new, and HCD is reviewing all of this analysis and data for the first time as well. So per the bill, AFFH requires jurisdictions to take meaningful actions that overcome patterns of segregation and foster inclusive communities free from barriers that restrict access to opportunity for all people, regardless of race, religion, familial status, disability, etc. All the legally protected classes are listed. These meaningful actions are in our program section, which is section 4 of the document. So this section has tons of data and maps going over all of these AFFH details, but to synthesize all of that, AFFH looks at access to opportunity based on factors like jobs, transit, the environment, air quality, schools, and daily needs like retail, grocery stores, et cetera. And all of these factors contribute to upward economic mobility. The data shows that the majority of census tracts in the city have a moderate to high level of access to opportunity. There are no census tracts that are classified as high segregation and poverty. Two census tracts are identified as low resource, which is our Oakview community. There are a few factors that contribute to fair housing in Huntington Beach. This includes our regional composition and location, which means that the city is close to the ocean, which drives up cost. It's also close to the 405 freeway, near job centers like Long Beach and LA and Irvine, which also drives up demand for housing and cost as well. As we just mentioned, the city has generally high access to opportunity, but there is some disparity, as mentioned, regarding the Oakview area. So given all of this data and information, the conclusion is that in order to affirmatively further fair housing, the identification of sites to accommodate the RHNA intentionally improves conditions for lower income households within the city. So here is some info on Section 4. This is the housing plan. There are 9 goals in the housing plan, including goals for affirmatively furthering fair housing, accommodating the RHNA at all income levels, and maximizing solutions for people experiencing homelessness. There are 40 programs in this section to support carrying out these goals. So goal 2 in the housing plan is to provide adequate sites to accommodate the projected housing unit need at all income level identified by the RHNA. And RHNA is an acronym that stands for Regional Housing Needs Allocation. The RHNA is what initiates the housing element update process and gives every jurisdiction a quantified housing need by income category. So the state, which is HCD, provides a regional determination for the number of units that each metropolitan planning organization needs to plan for. So our local MPO is called SCAG, which is the Southern California Association of Governments. And so HCD gave SCAG a regional determination of 1.3 million housing units to plan for. So then SCAG developed a RHNA methodology, and they used that methodology to divide up that 1.3 million units among each of its 197 member jurisdictions in SCAG, including Huntington Beach. So here we have the city's 2021 to 2029 RHNA. As you can see, the total number of units to demonstrate zoning capacity for is 13,368. Just over 5,800 units are for very low and low income households. About 2,300 are for moderate income and 5,200 for above moderate income. So this table shows an overall breakdown of the city's strategy to accommodate the RHNA. The housing element shows that the city is not able to meet the RHNA, utilizing only projects that are approved or pending in the pipeline, but will be occupied during the planning period, ADUs, and the 3 hotel-motel affordable housing conversions. Therefore, the proposed affordable housing overlays and rezonings are needed in order to demonstrate adequate zoning capacity for the RHNA. And this 4,800 unit number remaining at the bottom for very low and low income is really a big factor in that. So since the city is not able to meet its lower income RHNA through pending projects, ADUs, and the hotel motel conversions, it's required to do what is called an adequate sites program. The housing element law requires that the program allow for a minimum default density of 30 units per acre, which is known as the minimum density necessary for a project to provide units at those lower income levels. There are a few other things too, like providing 20% lower income units means that residential development is permitted by right, and exclusively residential development is allowed. It does not have to be mixed use. Next, this is some information on the methodology of the adequate sites section, which is Appendix B in the housing element. There are a lot of bills and laws related to housing elements now that the city's document has to comply with. Because the city identified capacity for more than half of its lower income RHNA on non-vacant properties, HCD required a detailed sites analysis. The city needed to show substantial evidence that the property will be developed and demonstrate that the existing uses would not be an impediment to development of housing during the planning period. The substantial evidence described in the document includes past trends in redevelopment on similar types of properties, existing conditions of the properties, such as being underutilized or having few permanent buildings, outdoor storage, et cetera. The site's inventory also has properties that are smaller and some that are larger, and we need to do additional analysis in order to justify including those sites in the inventory. Sorry, I went ahead too fast. Also, the actual sites identified needed to comply with the AFFH requirements of AB 686, including that they have proximity to transit, services and daily needs, and have readily available infrastructure to connect into. Also, the site capacity analysis is required to show information about any environmental constraints on properties. You'll also see a lot of information in the document about the city's past performance with residential development on properties that are similar to the properties in the 6-cycle sites inventory. You'll see that phrase past performance a lot. It shows that residential development is feasible on these types of properties and would be able to occur during the planning period. The methodology is also required to show that there will be no net loss of housing, and this dictates in our sites analysis the assumption that each site will not be built at the maximum permitted density. The document assumes development at 80% of the maximum permitted density. So here is an overview of the Adequate Sites program. The proposal includes an expansion of the existing affordable housing overlay within the Beach Edinger Corridor specific plan. There is also a proposed new affordable housing overlay to be applied on sites identified in the Gothard corridor area, as well on industrial and oil-related properties within the Holly Seacliff specific plan, aka SP9, at Golden West and Garfield. And the overlay is also proposed on Golden West College. There is a proposed RH overlay on the former South Coast Supply site on the west side of Golden West within the Ellis Golden West specific plan, aka SP7. There are only 2 properties proposed to be rezoned to residential medium high density, aka RMH, and that includes the Chuck E. Cheese on McFadden and the Frontier Yard on Slater and Gothard. So first, we'll discuss the existing Beach Edinger Corridor specific plan, aka SP14. There is an existing affordable housing overlay within SP14, which was adopted in 2020. It permits residential projects by right if they propose at least 20% lower income units on the site. The SP14 area is already zoned for residential development and allows development at densities that can accommodate lower income development as well. The existing development standards would remain applicable to any project that's submitted pursuant to the SP14 affordable overlay. And these sites were chosen due to their current states as underutilized commercial properties, their potential for lot consolidation with other adjacent parcels, and access to the freeway, jobs, services, and transit. Here are some photos of the Beach Edinger specific plan area. You can see, again, a lot of surface parking, aging buildings. You can also see our navigation center property down at the bottom. Now, here is an overview of the proposed affordable housing overlay. This is an overlay designation that would not change the base land use and zoning of these properties. No nonconformities will be created as a result of applying the overlay. The overlay would establish Chapter 229 in the zoning code that would provide all of the development standards. It would allow for development up to 70 units per acre, and the development standards are to facilitate this development at the proposed density per state laws. Any project proposed pursuant to the overlay must provide 20% lower income units on site. There's a maximum height limit of 4 stories, and there's also a sunset provision that this overlay ends at the 6th cycle planning period, or when the city achieves its RHNA for all income categories, whichever occurs first. So first, outside of any specific plan areas, there are select sites primarily located along the RT-zoned Gothard corridor proposed to be designated with the affordable housing overlay. The Gothard corridor was identified because many of these properties are underutilized. They could be consolidated with other adjacent lots to support residential development. And this area is well connected to many amenities of the city. It's pretty close to Central Park. It can access the freeway by traveling up to Edinger pretty quickly. It also has pretty close access to daily needs like services and retail, et cetera. Next, in consultation with Golden West College administration, the housing element identified the Golden West College campus to be part of the affordable housing overlay. Appendix B identifies construction of up to 600 residential units on the campus, and that is in accordance with its 2030 comprehensive master plan goal to develop 600 units on the campus. Here are some representative photos of what these properties look like. The top two are Golden West College. You can see they have a lot of surface parking areas. They also have some internal space within the site that they could develop on. The bottom two photos are of the Gothard area. As you can see, some of the properties out there are underutilized with just outdoor storage and chain link fencing, have not had much recent investment. So again, even if an existing industrial property is within the overlay, the existing business could continue to operate, improve their property, and grow their business pursuant to what their base zoning designation is. Okay, next we have the proposed affordable housing overlay within the SP9 area, Holly-Cicla specific plan. Existing industrial designated properties along Golden West Street are proposed for inclusion within the SP9 affordable housing overlay. These sites are on the east side of Golden West, north and south of Garfield. Housing Element identifies these sites due to their potential for development during the planning period, notably because portions of the overlay are under single ownership, and many of these properties are underutilized with few permanent buildings and a lot of unused vacant space. Because many of these parcels are under single ownership, there's potential for lot consolidation as well. Also, this area has access to arterial streets, primarily Golden West and Garfield, that would provide connections to everyday services, jobs, schools, and parks. Next, there is a proposed area designated for an RH, or residential high density, 30 units per acre overlay within SP7, which is Ellis Golden West specific plan. This area is located on the west side of Golden West, north of Garfield. The majority of this area was previously occupied by South Coast Supply, an outdoor landscape supply business, but they have now closed and they're no longer operating here. This site is currently designated for estate residential in SP7. The proposed SP7 RH overlay would allow residential development in accordance with the maximum density and zoning standards of the existing RH requirements in the code. This area was identified due to it being a large area with only two primary owners. The area is underutilized with access to arterial streets like Golden West and proximity to services, daily needs, retail, schools, and parks. Also, the RH development standards are comparable to the existing SP7 estate density development standard requirements. As an example, the max building height in both the RH designation and SP7 is 35 feet. The RH also has a maximum 50% lot coverage requirement, and the other requirements of SP7 would apply to any development here, such as the open space requirements, design requirements, and equestrian trails that are required by SP7. So here are some photos of the SP7 area and the SP9 area. You can see much of this area has chain link fencing, outdoor storage, some shipping containers too, and oil-related equipment on the properties. So we just want to note that the housing element document is not a construction mandate, and no development or construction is proposed on any site as part of these actions. Also, the overlays do not change the base zoning of any property. Everything that's currently allowed by the base zoning will still be allowed if an overlay is applied to that site. Overall, the overlays add the option for a property to propose multifamily residential development if 20% of the units constructed are deed-restricted affordable units. Okay, so here we're back to our RHNA strategy table that we had up in the beginning. So with the proposed rezoning and affordable housing overlays, the city is able to provide adequate zoning capacity to accommodate its RHNA. Now, here are the factors taken into account for the affordability assumptions and calculations of the site capacity. You'll see this information is split up into densities less than 30 units per acre and 30 units or more per acre. 30 units per acre is an HCD standard of development density that can accommodate and absorb the cost of providing on-site affordable units. So therefore, any property that has zoning for less than 30 units per acre is not able to accommodate any low-income units, only moderate income and above moderate income. So affordable housing overlay sites were assumed to be developed with 30% lower income, 15% moderate income, and 55% above moderate units. And this is because they allow 30 units or more in density. The rezoning sites were assumed to be developed with 30% moderate income and 70% above moderate income units because they allow less than 30 units per acre in density. These assumptions do take into account that some sites would be developed as 100% affordable projects, and some sites may increase affordability in order to utilize density bonus provisions in the state law. Again, the no net loss requirements means that the city has to maintain an inventory of sites to accommodate the RHNA for each income level throughout the planning period. HCD recommends a 15 to 30% buffer on the capacity. So as an example for needing the buffer, say the housing element gets adopted, but several of the overlay sites develop with a project pursuant to the base zoning, and it's not residential. If we didn't have a buffer, then our available zoning capacity would not be able to accommodate the RHNA. The city would be out of compliance with housing element laws, and that would require the city to have a buffer on the zoning capacity in order for the city to be able to meet the RHNA at any time during the planning period. So this is why there's a buffer between the RHNA requirement and the zoning capacity provided in the housing element. That basically answers the question of why does the city plan for more units than what the RHNA says? Another example of these calculations would be that in a 100-unit project, we're assuming that 30 of those units would be for lower income, which is the very low and low category, and 70 of those units would be for moderate and above moderate incomes. So essentially, the lower income RHNA category is what drives the higher buffer percentages in the mod and above mod categories. So that in turn increases the overall unit capacity to be higher than the 13,368 RHNA units. And with that said, I will now turn it over to our Community Development Director, Ursula Luna-Reynosa.
Thank you, Nicole. Next. Oh, thank you. So the big question has been coming through from the community. We've received a number of questions. Can the city sue the state? Do we have to comply? Do we have to do this? And the short answer is yes, of course we can sue the state. Anyone can file a lawsuit. The question is, will we be successful in litigating that type of an action? Particularly in light of the new housing bills that have been introduced and adopted and are now part of the law, it really strengthens the position of the state as it relates to housing. And I'm not going to predict whether we would win or not, but it is uncertain. I will leave it at that. The city did actually try to sue the state on a few housing bills, and you can see the Huntington Beach loses housing case with state of California. We were unsuccessful in that endeavor. And one of the newer laws allowed the state of California to sue cities who had uncertified housing elements. And we were in that position during the last housing cycle, and we were the first city in California to be sued by the state of California under that piece of legislation. We ultimately did come into compliance, as was mentioned, and so didn't need to see how that was going to end. But the new bills have really increased the amount of people that can sue the city if we don't have a certified housing element. So not only can developers sue, which they always have been, if they were an applicant and they had standing, one of their projects was denied, they could sue the city. But now the state can also sue. Individuals can sue, and interestingly, third parties, which have no standing, can sue. And there have been a number of cases litigated under these categories, and they have been to the benefit of the housing developer. So there's a lot of potential litigation risk to the city by not having a certified housing element, and we would be responsible for those fees associated with litigation. I think, though, that it is important to note that even if we do come to a certified housing element, the city of Huntington Beach could still sue the state. And in fact, it would be a better situation if the city wanted to pursue that type of litigation to be in a position of having a certified housing element first. And there's some other reasons I'm going to go into, which is that if we don't have a certified housing element, we lose potentially our permitting authority. This has actually been a concept that's been around for some time. A court can order a moratorium of the city's permitting authority, and this has actually been done. There's a number of counties and cities that have lost such permitting authority. I'm going to give 3 somewhat local examples. One was the city of Pasadena, where there was a moratoria on all development until they attained a state-certified housing element. Mission Viejo, they had a different type. Their moratoria was on 3 specific sites that they had identified in their housing element, but they didn't rezone those sites, and so their moratoria was that they could not issue any permits on those particular sites. And then the city of San Clemente had a moratoria on their ability to issue certain types of building permits, and that was related to their inability to zone for a homeless shelter. So this has been around for some time, and again, with the new laws that have strengthened some of these issues, it's even more likely. There's financial penalties. That's a newer bill, but it can be pretty extensive, up to $100,000 per month. And court receivership. Again, this is a newer bill that's allowing this particular provision to move forward, but there are a lot of reasons that we want to have a certified housing element. And the next one I wanted to highlight is the builder remedy, which under state law, developers in cities whose housing elements are out of state compliance can turn to filing a builder's remedy project, which does not require it to go through the normal process. This has actually been around for a number of years, but I believe developers were hesitant to take advantage of it because there was some uncertainty. However, with these new housing bills that have been recently adopted, I'm speculating that the development community is feeling more comfortable with this. Particularly, we have been made aware that the city of Santa Monica has recently experienced this. So a developer filed for 4,000 new units, 10 applications, 4,000 new units. This is a quote from the Santa Monica planning manager. This is not theoretical, this is very real and it's happening. These are projects that, as long as they include 20% on-site affordable or 100% moderate, we must approve those projects. The consequences are already in effect. And in fact, since this article had been published, Santa Monica has come into compliance with a state-certified housing element, but these applications that were already in the door before that time, they stand, they're vested if the developer decides to pursue forward with them. And the other example we wanted to highlight was the city of Redondo Beach. We have 2 short clips that I think do a better job of articulating this. If you could please hit play.
Leo Postilnikov owns a very unusual piece of property in exclusive Redondo Beach, right on the water.
I want to keep the volume of the space, which, as you can see, is like 90 feet clear span.
It's a 49-acre power plant due for deactivation. It is huge. Postilnikov wants to turn it into 2,500 rental apartments, 500 of them affordable housing.
With 500,000 square feet of office, event space, a hotel, retail, shopping.
It's a whole neighborhood.
It's a whole neighborhood.
Thing is, he's been trying to get the green light for a while.
It's been in various stages for over 2 decades.
The city's mayor says the property is zoned for power or a park and that this development is dead on arrival. But he and the city have fought all this time.
And then please push play.
The reason that converting this into housing is such a big deal is that California ranks 49th out of 50 states when it comes to housing units per capita.
Now, the state is enforcing laws that require cities to make housing commitments or face penalties like losing the right to deny local building permits. So when Redondo Beach missed a deadline for filing its state-required housing plan, Basilnikov spotted a loophole.
That gave me an opportunity to submit under a builder's remedy.
Now, this city faces the very real prospect of all of this becoming housing and right in its yard.
So it was a very long clip. We shortened it so not to take up too much time. I think that with the reality of these types of applications coming forward, the City Council is put in a really difficult decision. Again, acknowledging all of the reasons why this is a tough decision to certify the housing element, that there are absolutely people, one way or another, that are going to be impacted by these actions. I think you have to weigh that against this idea that somebody could come in and we would have absolutely no control when we're not certified. It puts the city in a great position of uncertainty, and the state is eroding away our ability to do local control. I absolutely get that, and I know that many cities incorporated so that you could have zoning control. That's one of the primary reasons why a city does incorporate. That irony is not lost on me, that the state is removing that with these bills, but this outcome of not having a certified housing element makes that much, much worse. So with that, I'm going to, one last slide that I'm covering. Actually, I think I have a few more. So this was some more questions. Why is the city proposing high-density housing next to estate lots? And the proposed overlay for SB 7, Specific Plan 7, includes a density of 30 dwelling units per acre, but it does keep the 35-foot height limit and the 50% lot coverage and other development standards contained within the SB 7 plan, including required open space corridors and horse trails. And just for a sort of comparison's sake, the Elan project is 100 dwelling units per acre at 6 stories. It's a form-based code, so there isn't a lot coverage standard, and but it's practically like 100% lot coverage. So these development standards would very much dictate the type of development that could happen. And there's a few images here to just kind of give a sense of that. The one image shows different housing type from, single family all the way up to much more dense and some of the product type in between. The picture over to the right, that is about a 0.6 acre parcel. Those of you who can't see, there's 50 by 150 lots, and there's a total of 4 of them. And there's different housing types that are shown on here with different numbers of units. I think 12 is the most. That's the kind of rectangular one that's second from the top. And then there's like 4 and 3. Altogether, that density there is 30 dwelling units per acre. So if you were just to calculate, and there's like a single family home with a detached carriage unit and an ADU, all the way up to the 12-plex, which is the most dense. And the point just is that these neighborhoods can be developed in a way that allows for a transition that makes sense. And then the final picture is just to show in, for example, SP7 with the height of 35 feet and 50% lot coverage, there could be an area that, again, is completely closed off by a street. It fronts Golden West. It will have the trails and open space, and you would have a more dense product type, but it could be done in a very aesthetically pleasing way, and this just gives a little bit of a understanding of what that really looks like compared to a single-family existing home. Other questions that we've received is, can the apartments on Warner or any other location, for that matter, be redeveloped in order to accommodate our RHNA? And the state will not accept increasing density on existing housing sites as a valid potential for new housing. The sites must have a realistic potential to convert to housing or increasing the amount of housing without demolishing existing housing. So the state's really interested in new housing and doesn't see that when you have an area of existing housing that it's a strong candidate for redevelopment. Are there any options to the proposed sites recommended for City Council consideration? And yes, there are some options which we are going to present to you now.
Okay, we'll start talking about the options. I will go ahead and just preface the discussion by saying all the options that will be presented were the thinking behind them is they all meet the RENA. So we didn't include an option unless it could meet the RENA. And two, they attempt to address the concerns, the primary concerns that we've heard throughout this process, particularly starting from the Planning Commission public hearing. They do address the concerns to varying degrees. So some may look better than others to various people, and depending on what their concerns are. So the way that we've coded these options are sort of like green, yellow, red, green being the least challenging, all the way to red being the most challenging. And when we talk about the challenges, we talk about what's it going to take in terms of time, how long it'll take to make revisions to the housing element, budget, whether or not we're going to need to utilize more money for CEQA analysis, HCD acceptance, and this, again, is really mostly based off of our own staff level knowledge of HCD and housing element law, looking at the site criteria, so whether or not the sites or the option would be able to meet the requirements of housing element law and HCD certification. So with that, we'll start with option one. We call this reconfiguration of the SP7 overlay. What this option would do is reduce the area of the SP7 overlay by about half and increase the density on the part that remains. So essentially the rear half or the westerly portion of the overlay would be deleted, and the 3 parcels that make up the front portion adjacent to Golden West would remain, but they would be increased density on that site to make up for the loss of units overall. The capacity assumptions are based on 40 dwelling units per acre, and so because of the increased density, the development standards that would be proposed on this particular option would be what's proposed for the citywide affordable housing overlay. So you'd be looking at like a 4-story height limit and some other standards that would increase, I guess, the look and feel of the density at this location. However, we do believe that this particular option could be done relatively quickly. This is a site that HCD's already looked at before, and so reconfiguring the density on it can be done with a fairly certain amount of ease. In terms of how it addresses the concerns that we've heard from some of the residents, it doesn't completely eliminate the SP7 area, but it does reduce it by half. It doesn't make any changes to some of the concerns we've heard from SP9. And I will also note that we have heard concerns from other people from other areas of the city. We've heard the primary concerns from those from SP7 and SP9, but we have had other comments more sporadically from folks from other areas of the city as part of this process. So again, it meets the RENA, and there's really very little net effect on capacity, so we also believe that this would not result in any changes to or substantial changes to our subsequent EIR that was prepared for the project. So option two. Option two takes the Frontier property, which is located at the southwest corner of Gothard and Slater, and which is now in the housing element identified for rezoning at 25 units to the acre. This would increase the allowable density by putting it in the affordable housing overlay, which is the affordable housing overlay 70, capacity assumptions for this site are based on 56 dwelling units per acre. The development standards would be those that are proposed for the affordable housing overlay with a maximum building height of 4 stories. For this particular option, we do believe that because it's a site that's already been identified in the housing element, with some additional analysis due to the site's size, any site that's over 10 acres has to go through a large sites analysis if it accommodates lower income. We do believe, though, that this would be something that would be fairly simple to address and present to HCD. This option also meets the RENA requirements. And when I say meets, it usually, actually, almost every single option has the net effect of just a little bit less capacity than what's identified in the housing element. We don't ever go over what's identified in the housing element. And it gets us at least a 10% buffer in the lower income category. So for this option, it could result in eliminating the SP7 overlay or an overall reduction in density from the affordable housing overlay, which is 70, to an RH overlay, which is 30, in SP9. But it cannot do both. So it can address basically SP7 or SP9. And again, because the site was already included in the subsequent EIR and it doesn't have a net increase in capacity, we believe that this can be simply addressed through the CEQA document as well. So moving on, option 3. This is also, I forgot to mention, the headings are colored with how challenging these options are. So these first 3 options we would consider the easiest of options. So option 3 is really what we call the mixed density option. So what this option does is split the SP9 overlay basically at Garfield. So north of Garfield, that area would have a reduction in density from the affordable housing overlay to an RH overlay, that's from going from the 70 units per acre to the assumption of 30 units per acre. South of Garfield, those parcels would remain in the higher density affordable housing overlay. When you combine this with option 2, which is the increase in density at the Frontier site, the net effect of those changes results in the removal of the SP7 overlay completely, a reduction of the density in SP9, particularly adjacent to where the density was most concerning to the folks north of Ernest. And it also meets the RENA. Again, because all of these sites are already identified in the housing element and the net effect on the capacity does not increase, we believe that this can be handled quite simply through the existing subsequent environmental impact report. So now we're going to move on to a couple more options. The next couple of options are more in the middle category in terms of their ease of getting through the process and HCD. So this option, we refer to it as the reduced density. In this case, you're going to see all the parcels that are contemplated at the 30 dwelling units per acre. So the first change that this option does is basically remove half of the SP7 overlay, divides it in half. The westerly portion is removed, and then the easterly portion along Golden West would remain at 30 dwelling units per acre. The SP9 gets reduced overall to 30 dwelling units per acre, and an additional sites, 4.75 acre sites, which are essentially mostly Thomas properties, are added to the SP9 overlay, also at 30 dwelling units per acre. And then it also includes changing the frontier property from a rezone site to an RH overlay, again, the assumption of 30 dwelling units per acre. This particular option does a few things, addresses some concerns. One, in SP7, it reduces the area by half, but it doesn't completely eliminate SP7 area. In SP9, it decreases the density overall to 30 units per acre, and it adds some additional area. And then the frontier site changes from 25 to 30. This option meets the RENA, but because of the introduction of new sites that were not previously included in the housing element subsequent EIR, there would need to be some analysis done to determine whether or not it will have an effect on the necessity to recirculate the EIR. And also, this analysis would need to be presented to HCD, which would take a little bit longer time than maybe some of the other analysis on the other first three options. So we think that the timing on this option would, if it didn't need recirculation, probably could come back in a couple of months. And depending on whether or not recirculation would be required, some additional budget potentially for recirculation. If not, we would look to see if we could do the additional CEQA work within the existing project budget. Option 5 includes an increase in area within SP9 and a reduction in density overall within SP9. So what this does, it includes all of the industrial properties within the SP9 area and puts an RH overlay on all of it, which the assumption is at 30 units per acre. So the development standards would be at the existing RH zoning designation, the maximum building height, 35 feet. The net effect of this option would be a removal of the SP7 overlay and an overall decrease in the SP9 overall overlay to 30 units per acre, but it does increase the area overall. It also includes properties that consist of some industrial businesses that we heard very early on in the process that those industrial business owners were not favorable to having residential overlays due to potential incompatibilities with their businesses. They were concerned that if residential is constructed adjacent to their business, then those new residents would have issues with their business operations. Many of the businesses in this area do have an outdoor component to them. So this option, similar to option 4, requires some additional time and some additional sites analysis. Very likely requires recirculation of the EIR, and so would require some additional budget as well. Again, the net effect of this is, though, that it meets the RENA. Finally, option 6 is probably the most challenging, but has some interesting components to it. Immediate actions would be to add a program into the housing element that calls for the redevelopment of the Civic Center, so this building that we're in and the property that we are on. Combine that with an option to adopt the HCD approved housing element or any one of these other options, that would be the immediate action. So it doesn't necessarily remove or replace the SP7 overlay or SP9 overlay or make changes, but it could, once the city conducts the environmental analysis and prepares a rezone of the Civic Center site, as that goes through the process, let's say about 9 months to a year from now, the removal of those sites could go concurrently with actions to rezone the Civic Center site. This option would require essentially almost about a year I would say, and budget for a CEQA document. Lastly, we didn't include them, but there are potentials for, just like the Civic Center option, other locations would have the same type of process. So if there were other locations in the city that the city council would want staff to study, it's a very similar process to the Civic Center site, in that we would have to do some additional analysis, recirculate the EIR, and bring that back forward to HCD for a submittal. So where we're at is we had the Planning Commission public hearing. They looked at the HCD. They approved or recommended approval to the City Council of the HCD approved housing element and implementation plan actions. And very quickly, I'll go through what the process would be to modify the sites. So the first column, and again, they're coded in green, yellow, red, just to give an idea of the challenges or the length and time associated with each option. So you have the HCD approved housing element. The Planning Commission public hearing was completed October 11th. The City Council public hearing for that is tentatively scheduled for the 15th. And that ordinance adoption would happen on December 6th. It does not require any additional budget. Options 1, 2, and 3, if the City Council's feedback today is to proceed or explore any one of those 3 options, we would have to go back to the Planning Commission for another public hearing. We believe that can happen mid-November, and then we would bring a public hearing forward for that with those options to the City Council the end of November. Then ordinance adoption would occur at the same time as if it had come on the 15th. The housing element had come on the 15th on December 6th. None of those options require additional budget. Options 4 and 5, we think probably would take 1 to 2 months, so you're looking at a December-January timeframe, followed by City Council. And then we do think that might require a little bit of additional budget in case we need to recirculate the EIR or at least provide a detailed CEQA analysis if we do not need to recirculate the EIR. And then finally, option 6, that would probably take about a year. And so we would be looking at coming back next year, September, October, and that would take a substantial more amount of budget due to the requirement to prepare a new CEQA document.
I just wanted to clarify a little bit on option 6. There's sort of an option 6 A and B. A, if we just add it as a program to the housing element along with either what the Planning Commission has already approved or one of the options that have been presented this evening, that is a quick time frame, no additional budget. So that's just adding it as a program. It's not counting on it to accommodate ARENA whatsoever, but it opens up the door for a future action to remove or change one of the existing sites and substitute it as more study can be done, which will take about a year, some budget, to really look at how many units could be accommodated on this site so that we have a better understanding of what options that opens up for some of the other sites. So I just wanted to clarify that a bit.
So then finally, just a quick recap. Options 1, 2, and 3, and this is essentially the last slide, but also the impact to SP7 and SP9. When we look at the options, option 1 will partially eliminate SP7. Option 2 could eliminate SP7, but could not, if it did, it could not change SP9. Option 3 would eliminate SP7 and also partially reduce SP9. It also, I didn't mention this before, but it also essentially avoids those industrial properties that we heard directly from the business owners in those properties. Option 4 and option 5 both would eliminate SP7, although option 4 was that partial elimination, and then would reduce the density to 30 units per acre on SP9. And then finally, option 6 would do all of those things as well. That concludes our presentation, and we are happy to answer the council's questions, provide more clarity on the options.
Hang on just a second. I have to go all the way back to the beginning. So I'm sure someday this will be updated, but for now, Mr. Kalmick, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. I just have a couple of process questions. Thank you so much for all the additional work and listening to the feedback from residents and working to try to fit the square peg in the round hole here as we come down to the wire. So I guess for process questions, so if council were to kind of lean towards an option tonight, say option 3, for instance, and we said option, and then throw in option 6 in there as well. I guess the first part of the question is, on December 6th, do you imagine that happening before or after we seat the new council?
We would have to check with the city manager, but generally, I mean, in the years that I've been here, any business happens first.
Okay. But I guess either way, there would be a second reading of the ordinance
Correct.
after as well, so it wouldn't...
Of some of the ordinance, the housing element would be by resolution, would be adopted by a resolution. There would be a couple of other resolutions for the general plan amendments, but any ordinances related to the implementation actions would have adoption on December 6th.
Okay.
Yeah, so they'd be introduced at the special meeting of November 29th and finalized on December 6th.
So that would be the second reading on
Correct.
the 6th. Okay, that was my question. And then I guess going forward with option 6, for instance, right, that would be a hedge, right? So that we would say, okay, for the amount of time it takes us to analyze a full option 6 of including, say, the Civic Center or the Public Works Yard over on Gothard, we could pull out one of the, say we choose option 3, right? And we could pull out all the excess zoning there and put it back to effectively what it is, or change this, down zone it to 25 units or something like that in the future. So it's a get us certified so we don't end up with a 15-story, 2,000 unit apartment tower there, as opposed to using builder's remedy, and it gets us into compliance.
Yeah, so a program, a civic center program could be added to any option.
Okay, so we can do a housing element amendment, effectively, a general plan amendment in a year, and it's still, we would hopefully get pre-certified, have a letter from HCD saying if you do this, you'll still be in compliance, so we don't come out of compliance.
Yeah, usually we would coordinate with any sort of change in the sites, which we've done in the prior 2 cycles with HCD, so that when we brought it to the Planning Commission, City Council, we would have those answers.
Okay, and then so notification for this, could you talk a little bit about staff's notification, say for Frontier, like what the plan would be if we're gonna, granted it's already in the plan as housing as opposed to industrial, which its current use was, and it was to be rezoned, so it wasn't even an overlay. Could you speak a little bit about if, some of these other options that are kind of creeping into different neighborhoods, how that would be handled? And I guess the notification for the next process as a whole.
Right. Well, so because we are essentially starting over with the introduction of some new options, if that's what the sense we get from tonight, we're going back to the Planning Commission, and we would notice that we have heard from the community, and there is a provision that when you have over 1,000 properties affected, you can just do a notice in a newspaper, but we've decided we will over-notice that, and we will notify every affected property with a 300-foot radius. And so that would be noticed to the Planning Commission as well as to the City Council. We would just notice both of those hearings at the same time, and just over-notice for the sake of making as many people aware as possible.
Mr. Kalmick, I would like maybe a little more qualifying questions, and then I'll have Mr. Posey and Mr. Peterson speak so we can go to public comments.
Yeah, I was just going to,
Okay.
one quick follow-up on the
All right.
notification, then I'm done. As that, I'm assuming, and again, if we decide to not, today give some direction to continue moving this forward, that notification wouldn't just be the legal, like, you're going to have a ZTA, ZMA, like we would try to make it a little bit more readable for the layperson. We have the legal notification in there, but maybe another sheet that kind of explains a little bit more.
Yeah, I think It's complicated, so we'd probably maybe put a URL link
Sure.
so that there's a place for people to go
Okay,
for more.
because I've seen our
of that type of
notification sheet and it's cryptic, so I would hope that if that happened, that it would have some. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Posey, you're off.
With option 6, does that help tee up future for the DBFOM project, if that's already in process, or would we, because I know we kind of put that off and part of the Civic Center was contemplated. Does this help that, accelerate that, or does it matter?
I mean, it's a completely separate process. We're looking at this site for the purposes of the housing element and how it could accommodate RENA. I don't think it hurts that other process, but I wouldn't say it accelerates or slows it down in any way. It is obviously helpful to look at what we might want on our own site in this context. So.
Okay. And then options 1, 2, 3, since we have substantial housing element compliance, does exercising option 1, 2, or 3 change that substantial compliance? Because what we certainly want to not risk being out of compliance. We certainly want to keep moving forward if that's the will of the council. But what's any ramifications?
Well, we would have very limited time to get feedback from HCD, but we did have a conversation with them initially to talk about if we had some changes. And we believe that options 1, 2, and 3, the process for that we would have some informal discussions with HCD and bring something forward for adoption and then seek a substantial compliance based on the adopted housing element. So our substantial compliance letter is only applicable to the HCD approved the housing element, the one that the Planning Commission has already considered. Any housing element or revision to it that we would bring forward to the City Council would not have a substantial compliance letter. We would submit after adoption, but it would be based on some feedback that we would have received by the time we brought it forward to you from HCD.
So is your confidence level then, I won't ask that because that's probably speculative, but, or maybe Ursula knows where I'm going.
I think I'm anticipating where you're going. I just wanted to say what Jennifer did in a different way, and that is the only thing that we have absolute certainty on is that if the City Council were to approve what the Planning Commission has approved, we have a letter from HCD saying this is, this qualifies, this is.
Right.
So we feel very confident with that option. But the 3 here, based on the feedback we have from HCD, we have a high level of optimism that we would get certified within the same time frame that we were originally anticipating. No guarantees, but we have a high level of optimism on that.
Thank you. That answers it perfectly.
Mr. Peterson?
On the, you mentioned density bonuses. I mean, that's usually multitude of things. Isn't one of them extra stories? I know parking, taking away parking is, making them higher is.
Yeah, density bonus, concessions and waivers can include increases in stories, decreases in parking, decreases in setbacks, open space.
All that.
Yeah.
So we say 35 feet, but in reality, someone could get a density bonus and go higher.
They could, yes, and they could do that on any residential project.
Correct. Okay. Also, the time frame. What's the reason by the first meeting in December that this is all going through?
That's just the natural meeting that would fall on. So whether we brought the housing element on the 15th or the 29th, the next meeting after that would be December 6th.
That's right.
But we don't normally have a meeting on the 29th.
No, it's a special meeting.
So we've been informed that there was going to be a special meeting regardless of this or not, because there's so many items coming forward. I wanted to say that the original plan or thought was to bring this November 15th to the City Council, and that is because we have been in a hurry to try to get this certified. We are technically out of compliance as we sit here today. So if somebody wanted to come in under build or remedy, they could do that right at this moment. The faster we get certified, the we reduce that risk. So we are anxious and we are wanting to get this certified as quickly as possible. There was a request from the City Council at the last meeting to have this study session and look at some options. So we've gone back and looked at what is the fastest time frame that we could do this so that we can achieve that goal of getting certified as quickly as possible to eliminate that risk of somebody coming in and doing something none of us want.
Ms. Bolton?
Okay, thank you. You just answered the question that I was going to ask Ms. Luna Reynosa. So I was going to ask about the impact of the substantial compliance letter that we have right now, but we are currently subject to builder's remedy, correct? Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, oh, Mr. Peterson has a question.
So builder's remedy is there's projects out there, people going. They don't just come in and like your video that you showed, you know, that guy's been working on it forever, found a loophole. Do we have any of those projects knocking at our door right now on any of these properties?
We have 2 projects that were submitted under SB 35 that we have been able to hold at abeyance and try to have conversations to try to make them more palatable and without.
And what specific plan are they in?
Beach Edinger Corridor
So
specifically.
not on these sites, the industrial sites right now?
Correct, not
Okay,
currently here.
thank you.
I do believe then, since there's no more questions, City Manager, we open the public comments? Okay. Let me go ahead and read. Excuse me. That's what happens when you get too involved in, did I do it wrong stuff here? So we're going to have public comments now, and I'm going to have the city clerk read your name, and if you would please come down to the microphones, and if you're speaking and the other one's open, if you would step up, that would be terrific. How many speakers do you have?
We have 27 signed up.
Okay, very good. All right, let's go ahead and open the public comments. Public comments, and
I'll call the first group down.
thank you.
Gigi Jackson, Diane Bentley, Shirley Detloff, Eric Walton, Carl Temple, Deborah Rowe, Carolyn Lewis, Aries Akuban, Peter Zofria, Eleni Hapasis, Cindy Barrios, Kathy Sharkoff, Rock Bailey, Larry Kudinsky.
Well done. Okay, Ms. Jackson, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council and all protocols established. My name is Gigi Jackson, and I'm a homeowner in Huntington Beach. Before I get started, I just want to, good grief. I just want to give kudos to this team here, Jennifer, Ursula, and Nicole. I mean, I'm just impressed with the work that they've done. I've been following this process for over 2 years, and the entire time that I've been coming, I've never seen this many people in any of the participation. So my hat's off to you ladies. Excuse my voice, I'm just dealing with some respiratory challenges. However, I purchased my home as a dual investment and a safe location for my sons to live during their college days, and a retirement home for me during my retirement years. My eldest son convinced me that he felt safe in this community. So we found the property, made the investment. Now, years later, after his graduation and well into his career, now he has returned to Huntington Beach only to feel, and he shares with me, I'm not sure this is where I want to raise my son. This community is reflecting a side I didn't experience before. And what I've shared with my son is, this is a lovely community. I think we need to stay and share what our values are. I say all that to say that you are our elected officials, and we trust you all to make the decision of what's best for the residents of Huntington Beach. And, and I ask that you follow the direction of this well-thought-out plan, because basically it's just a plan. My second point is the city staff, as I've already pointed out, have worked tremendously on this housing element, and they've provided many opportunities for all the residents to give input and share concerns. And although I respect the point of view of all the residents in opposition, remember this is only a plan and that it's required by the state, and we have to consider what's best for Huntington Beach. Finally, a quote from my former superintendent and my boss. He says, "I may not know the answer or the recipe for a successful plan, but I do know the recipe for failure, and that's trying to please everyone." I say to you, as our trusted and city council members, please pass this document so that we can submit it to the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Jackson, I'm sorry, that was you. I'm sorry, next speaker.
Yes, okay. My name is Diane Bentley, and I've lived in Huntington Beach for over 20 years. I thank the City Council for this opportunity to speak out in favor of the housing element in whatever form it takes. And I thank the staff who've developed a very good set of alternatives. Housing costs for both rental units and owned homes in Huntington Beach have risen by alarming rates in the past several years, to the point that households from extremely low income to moderate income cannot afford to live in our city. Our children and grandchildren are being priced out of the opportunity to live in the city they grew up in. Some of the people with long connections to our city even end up living on the streets or in parks because they can't afford a place to live. Among the goals of the housing plan put forward in the latest housing element is the provision of safe, affordable housing for all economic segments of the community, especially special needs populations like seniors, young people just starting out, single-parent families, and those experiencing or at risk of homelessness. The housing element under consideration for 2021 to 2029 gives us the best opportunity for meeting our housing goals and to retain local control over housing development in Huntington Beach. And I strongly urge the City Council to approve it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, Mayor Del Glaze and members of the City Council. My name is Shirley Detloff. I've been a resident of the city of Huntington Beach for over 50 years. I'm here this afternoon to urge you to prepare the vote on the housing element when it comes before you on November 15th. I am hopeful that by that time you will have a document that can satisfy both the state requirements and the concerns of the citizens who have expressed their thoughts regarding the housing element. I hope that you are working with the state, with the planning staff, and the citizens who may be impacted by your decisions. I know you already know this, but the housing element is so important to the future of the city. We must be able to provide housing for all of our residents, no matter their income level. Not only is it a state requirement, but it is the humane and the right thing to do. I think you all know, and I'm going to now deviate from what I'd written before after hearing the meeting tonight so far, just to let you know that and you know this already, that we have a population out there, and it's not just the homeless population, it's the average person. It's persons that work in our industrial areas, in our tourist industry, which is so important to us, our senior citizens, our children who are living in cars at night and then going to school the next day. We have this population, some who can't live here and have to come in here to work, but others who have to live on the street. So you know that already. You also know what the repercussions will be if we do not have a certified housing element. I won't go into them in detail. I was going to do that earlier, but you've had such good information already tonight. You know what would happen to this city if we don't have a housing element. And I want to conclude by saying, and it's been said before, but this planning department has done the insurmountable. They have done an extraordinary job in getting this housing element to you, even in its final form that went to the Planning Commission, but now taking those extra steps, working with the council to make sure that we have a document that not only meets all the state's requirements, but addresses the concerns of our citizens. I have never seen, and I was once a planning commissioner, I have never seen a job that has been so well done by this staff. I found it, as I sat here listening to the options they were presenting to you, this was an incredible job, and you have a group of people that you can thank for listening to the concerns of the residents of this city and providing you with a path that you can follow so that on November the 15th, you can take a vote. You can take a vote on either going forward and doing other things, or you can vote on a housing element that meets the needs of this city. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hello, my name is Carolyn Lewis. I moved to Huntington Beach 23 years ago in the Seagate area. I'm very familiar with that Redondo Edison plant because we moved because of the density in Redondo Beach. It ruined our streets, it ruined our communities. It was a beautiful place for us to come here because it was advertised as beautiful parks, wide open areas, nice schools, and I found that to be true. I would hate to see that high areas of that intense, I'm sorry, I lost my thought because this is a lot to comprehend in just a couple of hours.
It is.
We just heard about it 1 week ago. But what I want to say to you is I know you have a huge job ahead of you. And also the people who have developed this. It was impressive. I don't want to see our neighborhoods destroyed. And that is when I see something like the wide open areas, like the equestrian center, the area over there where we have the urban forest, our beach communities. Our area in Redondo Beach was built right up to the shoreline. You can't even see the ocean anymore. So I'm urging you to look at that, maybe in the industrial areas, a little more high density, but not the 5 stories, or let us see the sky when we live around the beach. I'm retired now, and I think I'm the oldest one in the community, so everybody else is home taking care of children. They couldn't come tonight, so I'm speaking for our community, hoping that you can make a good decision for us. Well, we're going to depend on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Deborah Rowe, and I'm representing my husband, Brian Rowe, who had to be out of town today. Thank you for your presentation. It was very well done. I appreciate getting to learn about this. I'm in the same community with Carolyn and agree with her thoughts and encourage you to look at industrial areas instead of our backyards for a building, tall and lots of units there. So I'm praying for you. This is a hard decision, and I'm supporting, and thank you for all of your hard work.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening, Mayor Delgeese and City Council. My name is Carl Temple. I am a 33-year resident of Huntington Beach. I am an original owner in the Seagate neighborhood, which backs up to the area that relates to Ernest Avenue. And so myself and other members of this neighborhood are greatly concerned at the density that's been offered as part of the plan. I am encouraged a little bit that there are options from city staff and things that might alleviate that. But I live roughly about 200 feet away from Ernest. It's my understanding that the border of the Seagate neighborhood is roughly 70 feet from across the street from Ernest. we can't live with the density that's been offered currently. I would encourage the council and staff to aggressively pursue the things that need to be done with these options and find a creative way so that not only we don't have a 4-story or 5-story, whatever that dwellings per acre might be, hovering so close to our neighborhood, and for homeowners that are directly, against that property line and that line, it's going to be a terrible situation. And so the other thing too is the Ernest Avenue in that area, it's going to take significant effort just to get the traffic through and the noise and all those things. So greatly appreciate the flexibility and options. I greatly encourage the city council and staff to find a way to minimize these issues that are clearly difficult for the Seagate neighborhood. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, Mayor Delgaze and fellow city council members. My name is Arisa Kubian, and as most of you are aware, I'm an Edwards Hill resident and a manager of HB United for Responsible Zoning, an organization that was established, supported, funded by my fellow residents to stop the proposed zoning overlay specific to the Brindle Thomas property within the Golden West Ellis specific plan. I would like to take a moment and thank each of you for taking the time to meet with our team over the past 3 weeks. It was our hope our voices would be heard and our concerns would not fall on deaf ears. I would also like to acknowledge this study session as it is a direct response to my fellow residents being heard, so thank you. Over the course of this study session, you will hear some real-life concerns and compelling arguments as to why the proposed housing plan is flawed and wherefore high-density housing at the Brindle Thomas property is not the right fit. Mayor, council members, based on our discovery, we feel the city failed to properly notify residents within close proximity of the proposed zoning overlay. The subsequent flawed EIR is defective in numerous ways. A superior alternative was provided but not selected, and the city skipped required studies of critical topics and utilized antiquated metrics for traffic within the report. In closing, as a business owner since the age of 12, I have learned that all problems have solutions and that most solutions are arrived from reason. We ask that you reason with us. We humbly request that you remove the Brindle Thomas overlay from the housing element plan by approving, thank you, Jennifer, option 2 and 3, and move this forward so that we can have what we signed up for originally. We really appreciate your time. We understand the challenges that you guys are faced with, and we are hopeful that you guys would sincerely consider option 2 and 3 as it resolves a lot of our residents' concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
My name is Yori Suzuki. I'm an Edwards Hill resident and an advocate for homeowners of Edwards Hill through HB United. Mayor, council members, and planning department staff, we appreciate your individually meeting with us and listening to the concerns of your 317 constituents on Edwards Hill. We want to thank the City Council and the planning staff for considering the proposal to remove the Brindle Thomas property from the plan under options 2 and 3. It is our hope and expectation that it will be formally ratified at the City Council's hearing scheduled for December 6th. Looking back, we wish our meetings could have occurred before last June, which is when the city added the property to the housing element. We were particularly pained to read in your plan documents that city staff had been meeting for months with over 25 developers and housing advocacy groups. We struggle to understand why the city did not notify and engage with its own residents who would be most impacted by this extreme zoning change. The Planning Commission states the city satisfied the state law notice requirements by publishing a small notice in the town newspaper. As an attorney, that piqued my interest, so I checked. Government Code Section 65094 requires notices to be sent to all owners of real property within 300 feet of the real property that is the subject of the hearing. So as it applies to Edwards Hill, the city should have notified at least 81 of the residents. We actually went out there and measured. The commission has claimed this rule does not apply because the overlay is a citywide project and affects more than 1,000 residents, at which point the direct notice requirement gets waived. I believe this is a misreading of the law. First, the code language refers to the subject property in the singular form. So you cannot combine properties throughout the community to reach 1,000 resident threshold. Indeed, the commissioners understood this because they voted on each parcel individually at the last hearing. Even if the properties were combined citywide, there was still the duty to notify homeowners who lived within 300 feet at each site, so long as their numbers didn't exceed 1,000. So we trust that the city will in the future observe this state requirement and notifies us of its plans. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
First of all, I'd like to thank the city council members for meeting with us individually one-on-one, and for Jennifer's time. I know she had to sit through a number of those meetings, and that's tough. But I think that we feel like you heard us, and we appreciate that. We encourage the city council to accept options 2 and 3. We believe that that's a good start to solving some of this density issue. We're concerned about the alternatives as they relate to the Ellis Golden West specific overlay plan, and that it should not be accepted as is. Adding high-density units to the original specific plan on Ellis and Golden West, which is an equestrian-friendly estate homes community that restricts the density to 3 homes per acre, clearly does not fit and violates the city's planning policy 101 in that very housing element document, as described on page 4-2 of the housing element, which is to preserve the character, scope, and quality of existing residential neighborhoods, and that's in quotes. The specific plan as originally drafted is so specific as to height, density, architecture, and setbacks that it seems as though the assertion within the overlay that the zoning change is consistent with the original specific plan is inconsistent. We as residents are extremely concerned that including this parcel in the arena will subject the property to further density as a result from recent past state laws such as AB 211, SB 6, and SB 10, making it a virtual certainty that developers will raise the density even higher due to bonus units, which will make any development of this property subject to even more incongruous development. And based on those laws, the city will have no choice but to allow a more dense development with only ministerial approval. The city's housing plan is in excess of 60% of the required units to meet the RHNA to the housing plan. The units represent a small fraction of only 2.4% of the total housing element plan of 21,000 units and can be replaced with alternative sites or simply removed without being out of compliance or just simply adopting options 2 and 3. We understand both the need and the requirement of the RHNA to include very low income and low income components. The Ellis Golden West overlay contributes 113 to those units to the very low income out of the 6,500 total amount units, or just 1.7%. Accordingly, removing the Ellis Golden West property from the RHNA will still leave the entire RHNA with excess low income units. Based on the minimal contribution of the Ellis Golden West overlay plan to the RHNA and its complete violation of what is a very specific plan relating to the Edwards Hill specific plan, we urge the City Council to remove the Ellis Golden West plan from the RHNA and adopt options 2 and 3.
Thank you. Next speaker. Thank you.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Eleni Hapsis. I'm also a resident of Edwards Hills. I, in addition to my other fellow colleagues here, also would like to have options 2 and 3 approved after Jennifer has presented that this evening. I do have a few questions here. Has an appropriately thorough assessment of the environmental conditions of alternative sites in the Sea Cliff area been completed? According to the housing element, which is in Section 3, page 52, it states that presence of hazardous materials was considered for candidate sites, like from petroleum-related products and activities. And, quote, there are no known sites in the inventory containing these activities. Yet, petroleum-related activities were and continue to be conducted at the Brindle Thomas property in the Ellis Golden West overlay, before being used for various other businesses like landscaping. The shellx.com database shows 7 active and 2 capped wells on the Brindle Thomas property. One only needs to drive by the property and see there are 2 such wells located on the front-facing property to Golden West Street, creating a hazardous situation during any construction or post-construction process for methane and other exposures, and the potential to have other toxic drilling waste that the report does not appear to address at all, except to say there are no known oil activities on the property. This leads me to believe the City Development Department did not adequately address these risks and potential exposure to the surrounding neighborhoods, which means the overlay and housing plan are incomplete, and that more study needs to be performed before any consideration is given to any new zoning on the property. Otherwise, the EIR is all but non-existent. The city was also notified of the active oil wells within the Holly Seacliff overlay in a letter from People for Housing dated November 9th, 2021, housing element page 806 to 814, which causes me to question whether any adequate analysis has been formed at that site as well. I understand the short time the city has in submitting the RHNA to the state. That has now passed the 2-year window, which the state provided our city to come up with such a plan. But the failure to meet the 2-year window does not mean that the city should just ignore the hazardous potentials of these properties to the neighborhood. The oil wells are spread throughout the Ellis Golden West property, and accordingly, there's no way to develop this property without dealing with the active and capped wells, without disrupting the areas around the wells. Accordingly, the Ellis Golden West overlay should be removed from the RHNA until such time as a complete and thorough environmental study is performed before a developer is able to develop the property without anything more than the sign-off by the city. The result of this broad approval to develop the property is a potential environmental hazard that may not even be felt for a number of years. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Cindy Barrios, and I appreciate the opportunity that this meeting represents for the residents to be heard. And I'm very thankful for all the time and energy that staff put into the report and preparing options that address our concerns, particularly options 2 and 3. But I'm still profoundly concerned about the significant and unavoidable impacts that were identified in the SEER that haven't been fully studied and will be dismissed by a statement of overriding considerations. The impact areas include air quality, greenhouse gases, hydrology and water quality, noise, and utilities and service systems, essentially all the areas affecting the daily quality of life, health, and safety for the residents of Huntington Beach. At the Planning Commission meeting on October 11th, it was stated that impact analyses were not in the purview of the housing element, and that impact analyses are only conducted after a specific development is proposed. However, because of the rules for RHNA-related projects, not doing the analysis before voting on rezonings and overlays ensures that there will be no public review or comment on adverse impacts, and the Planning Commission will have limited ability to require changes. We keep hearing that we have to become RHNA compliant or we will lose local control, but it certainly seems we will be losing control either way. The city is currently on course to legally authorize a housing plan of 21,000 units, easily creating a 20% or more population increase without any idea of the magnitude of the problems that will occur for schools, traffic, parking, utilities, the environment, or other city services. There's no budgetary plan for increased costs to police and fire support, on and off-site improvements, or schools and social services. In particular, the impact of putting 1,700 units, according to Table B14, at the intersection of Golden West and Garfield has not been assessed. This could easily double the population currently in Seacliff and will certainly have profound impacts on the area's schools. Taking out the 500 units assumed for the Ellis Golden West overlay could at least mitigate some of the predictable impacts and protect Seacliff Elementary from the health and safety concerns associated with a construction site right next to an active playground. There are several methods available to have done the modeling and impact analyses, all of which could have been completed within the planning cycle. Since the rezoning and overlays set the legal basis for implementing the plan, and there will be no public review of impacts for RHNA projects, why wasn't an integrated adverse impact analysis done before voting on these changes? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, go ahead.
Good afternoon, City Council members. My name is Kathy.
Could you lower the mic to your, yeah, there you go. We can hear you now.
Okay,
Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Sharkoff, and my house is less than 100 feet from the Brindle Thomas property. I was given no notification. In fact, I was just found out word of mouth. I had a lot of concerns. Primarily, I was wondering why some sites adjacent to the area zoned for low-density residential housing were treated differently than the Ellis Golden West SP7 overlay. For example, the 3 sites that are zoned for residential medium density with a maximum density of 25 units per acre and no low-income units. These sites are the Chuck E. Cheese Frontier Yard and the Reliable Lumber. They're all adjacent to residential low-zoned areas at a density of about 7 homes per acre and are listed as a tax credit allocation committee opportunity map at the highest resource area. The Ellis Golden West specific plan, SB7, further restricts the density to 3 homes per acre. And shares the same highest resource area. Yet, the Ellis Golden West site is proposed to have a residential high overlay with a maximum density of 35 units per acre and has a low-income unit allocation. Why is this? There is no reasonable rationale for treating these differently. The best remedy for this biased treatment is to remove the Ellis Golden West RH overlay. And I ask you to approve options 2 and 3 instead. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
I'm Rick Bailey. Thank you for developing the options for removing the Ellis Golden West overlay. The option 2-3 combination that's been mentioned helps remedy a concern we had on the unit allocation approach defined on page B17 of the housing element. The issue was selecting a 30% very low and low income, 15% moderate income, and 55% above moderate income allocation when the RHNA allocation for very low and low income units is 44%. At 30%, each candidate site has less units than the RHNA allocation by 14%. Because the state restricts the number of hotel conversions and ADUs used to compensate for that, there was a significant shortfall that had to be addressed. So more and more and more sites had to get added to compensate, which results in needing 21,000 units to fulfill the 13,368 unit plan, and a skewed buffer distribution of only 11% for very low and low income, 30% for moderate income, and 120% for above moderate income, as noted on page B18. Removing the Ellis Golden West overlay has minimal impact, less than 2%, and it can be made up by increasing the very low and low income units in other more suitable sites, as the team came up with in their options 2 and 3, like Frontier, but Chuck E. Cheese and Reliable Lumber also had that same overlay. I've done the math. An alternative allocation methodology, such as a very low income unit allocation of 35% instead of 30, increases the number of very low and low income units by over 220 units and increases the buffer to the 15% minimum margin that's requested. And it does it with over 2,000 less units than in the current plan. The developers can be incentivized to comply by revising the city program 3B, Affordable Housing Development Assistance Program 3B, Affordable Housing Development Assistance. It's described on page 418 in the plan, and you can just align the incentives to that goal. So you can revise this deficient strategy, or you can apply the option 2-3 combination to remove the Ellis Golden West overlay from the housing element. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Larry Katinsky.
I've owned a home on Edgewood Hill for 30 years, and I've practiced law in Orange County for 40 years. And I am vehemently opposed to the city's plan to build high-density housing on the Brindle Thomas property with the SP7 overlay. I appreciate what I heard earlier today, the options that are now in place, and of course urge that options 2 or 3 be approved by the council and the building stop on Brindle Thomas. But the problem is there should have been way more options to begin with, and our community should never have been placed on adjacent to these high-density housing locations. What I can't understand is what drove the decision to concentrate virtually all of the sites, almost all of them, on Beach Boulevard, Gothard Street, and Golden West Street, rather than a broader distribution throughout the entire city. In that housing element, 1,171 pages of it, Section 3 on page 141 states that the site strategy specifically seeks to disperse the RHNA sites throughout the community and claims the proposed sites disperse the regional needs allocation throughout the city. That's what your housing element states. But in direct contradiction of your own strategy, almost all 21,000 of the proposed sites are contained within only approximately 15% of Huntington Beach's land area on Beach, Gothard, and Golden West. I looked at the candidate site maps. You have several maps in there, and there's no way that the sites are dispersed throughout Huntington Beach. From what I saw, there's one on Edwards, which I assume is Chuck E. Cheese, and there's one on Magnolia. Otherwise, everything is between Beach and Golden West. The rest of the city is untouched. And what makes this more perplexing is that almost all of the areas containing no candidate sites are designated in your own report on all the maps as highest resource, high resource, highest opportunity, high opportunity for low-income families to help them thrive. Those are all in your report. It's all over the maps. But despite this, nothing is being built on the rest of the entire city, just in this little corridor between Beach and Golden West. And there's just no reason for that to occur. So there should have been many other options explored. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Greg Strayer. I've spoken before this committee. I have some prepared comments, which I'll follow briefly, and I have some off comments. But first of all, I am to address the impact of the housing element on the tax credit allocation committee ratings. This is an organization which rates cities for their suitability for low-density housing because it provides a nurturing environment for children to grow up in. Huntington Beach rates way at the top. So our whole city is ranked very, very high in this regard. The issue is with the report and the housing element, it doesn't take into account the impact of these new housings on our actual scoring for our city. I mean, we're going to be adding, we're going to be destroying jobs because we're going to be losing building areas. We're going to be putting more students into schools, causing crowding and presumed lower educational achievement. And we have found nothing in the plan that either plans to study this or provide any mediation to it. So our question is why wasn't an assessment done of the tax credit allocation committee's ratings, and why isn't something being done to mediate that? My off-record comments are that I grew up in Torrance, California for 30 years. Torrance is 170,000 people. Huntington Beach, where I now live, is 220,000 people roughly. Torrance got the housing plan approved for 5,000 new units. We're 30% bigger. We got approved for 13,000. Why is that? Why are we 2.5 times that in Torrance? Torrance and Huntington Beach are very similar in terms of proximity to the ocean and population, And I think we really need to go back and fight that 13,000 unit. I think that is improper and it's hurting our city. I'm also concerned that no one likes a bully, and I think that Huntington Beach and a lot of cities are being bullied by Sacramento. I think I like to see us stand up by fighting this 13,000 number, and perhaps with the new council we can do that and get this number reversed so that we can reduce crowding in Huntington Beach. And I'd like to see if we get that number reduce the housing density along Golden West so we aren't impacting the Seagate schools. I think that's a major issue to protect our schools, and I think if we can get that number reduced from 13,000, it'll help that schools a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Hi, I'm Eric Walton. I'm reading a letter here on behalf of Beth McCloskey and Donna Horn, who've both worked in real estate for 20 years or so, living also in the neighborhood. But I want to say thank you for the opportunity here. I understand it's a very complicated problem and there's a lot of options. It's difficult to get to this point. I'm just going to read the letter, though, from them. So, Dear Honorable Mayor DeGleese and members of the City Council, and you, of course, too. As homeowners of the Seagate Community Association in Huntington Beach, we're outraged and against any plans to adopt the proposed housing element and the proposed high-density housing along the Seacliff Seco-specific plan, HSSP, with a 70 dwelling unit accessory per acre density. We are dismayed to see that the draft proposal currently would allow for the 70 dwelling unit per acre. The HSSP calls for development of residences with a maximum density of no more than 25 dwelling units per acre anywhere in the plan. And for the specific area in the northeast corner of Golden West and Ernest, that's lots 393 and 394, the maximum density there should be 7 dwelling units per acre. The selected sites are not geographically dispersed within the city of Huntington Beach. I think someone else just mentioned that too. The Holly Seacliff and Ernst Golden West specific areas are being impacted unfairly compared to the other predominantly single-family neighborhood tracts. We believe the stated number one housing goal per the Huntington Beach housing element is to maintain and enhance the quality and affordability of existing housing in Huntington Beach. And this cannot be achieved if the City Council votes to increase the allowable density to 70 units per acre in the HSSP. As homeowners, we want the following 6 measures in the housing element. No greater density than 7 dwelling units per acre in those lots 393, 394. No more than 2-story buildings in those lots. No greater density than 25 dwelling units in the HSSP area. And no more than 3-story buildings in that area. And no roof decks or balconies that face Ernest Drive within 100 feet of Ernest Drive. And continue to allow no overnight parking on that street as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi. Hello, my name is Aaron Pye. Good evening, and great to see you, Mayor Barbara Douglas, Mayor Pro Tem Mike Posey, Eric Peterson, Dan Kelmick, Rhonda Bolton, Al Zelinka, Travis, Chris, and the whole gang here tonight. Great to see you. I'll introduce myself again for those that did not attend the October 18th City Council meeting. Like I said, my name is Aaron Pye. Born in Honolulu, Hawaii, I surfed the pier since I was 12. Not very good surfer, but I surf. Worked for the city of Huntington Beach picking up trash. Resident of Huntington Beach for 50 years now. Today, happily married with 4 kids and 10 grandkids. And all my family and all my 10 grandkids surf. We're a surfing family. We just got back from Hawaii late last week, and we caught a good swell and some surf, and the surf was fun. All my grandkids were ripping. But also, I went to Hawaii, I just got back, and I'm taking off to Cabo to go surfing, and I won't be here the next City Council meeting, and that's why I wanted to come here tonight. And I'm stoked and excited and honored to be here tonight visiting with you and representing my friends, family, and neighbors. We all live right next to the Thomas Brindle property located at Golden West between Ellis and Garfield. And I think you guys might have done some homework while I was in Hawaii, so I might be a little bit dated here. I am here this evening to humbly ask for your help to please stop the proposed high-density housing on specifically the Thomas Brindle property. personally concerning my home and neighborhood in which I've lived for 34 years, raised my kids, and I plan to remain in this house to have roots and heritage for all our kids and grandkids. My neighborhood will directly and significantly be impacted by the current sited location of the proposed high-density housing at the existing Thomas Brindle property. This proposed construction site is not a right fit. It is not in harmony with the current surrounding neighborhoods. And because of this, I humbly ask each one of you here tonight that on November 15th, to please vote no on approval of the proposed high-density housing at the specific location of the Thomas Brindle property located on Golden West between Ellison and Garfield. Thank you for your time and consideration. Much love and aloha, Pi family.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Patty? Wait. Thank you. Thank you very much. Due to time constraints, what we're going to do, folks, right now is the council needs to take a break to deliberate on the questions that you've asked, and then we're going to come back and start up with the public speakers again. So I don't want anyone to feel like they're going to be not getting heard. They are going to get heard. And if you didn't get heard, you'll be able to get heard after this. If you can make your comment about something specific so that we can address it when we come back from, what else did you want to say? Something,
Mayor, if I
Mr.
may, just
Yes,
for
please, Mr.
clarification.
City Manager.
Yeah, so after, and City Attorney, you can clarify, at 6 o'clock is the beginning of the regular City Council meeting.
That's right.
And so if it would be okay with you, Mayor,
Yes, and it is
maybe
with
the
Mr.
council could provide some of your comments based on the presentation by staff and the public comments, and then the additional public comments could come right after the 6 p.m. start.
Okay.
And continue on, is that okay?
Yes, I believe it is. Okay. Okay, let's see. It's hard with the all the other folks. Who would like to make a comment here? Mr. Kelmick, do you have anything? Yeah, I can't read it because it has, oh, no, Mike, go ahead.
No clarifying questions. Are you looking for direction now in advance of the more public speakers at 6 o'clock, or what are you looking for?
We're looking for some feedback from the council that we can take to go back and make any revisions that we need to the housing element so that we can bring it forward for a planning commission and city council public hearing.
Then I'll make a comment. I guess number one, I would like to commend the planning department for taking another deep dive and presenting comprehensive options as an alternative to the site, the Brindle Thomas site. And with that, it would be my preference that we look at options 2 and 3 and maybe even roll in. Option 6 could be, it doesn't have to be part of this. I mean, I think that would probably complicate things, but at some point we want to take a look at option 6 too, and maybe check with Mr. Crumby on how that would affect the future DBFOM project. So that's my 2 cents worth.
I also have a question. A number of the residents, I'd like to just state this. I know you've done a yeoman's job on doing this program. If there's something that we could do in the future as far as notification of any kind of project that's coming to neighborhoods and areas, we can figure out a way to do it better. I don't know what the answer is tonight, but that's what I'd like to see. The other thing I heard was, I do believe that we could probably use some explanation again of why this is being done. This is not something that we're making up or trying to avoid. The state is requiring us to do that. And there are comments just still being asked about, why are we doing this? We should do this or we should do that. So I'd like maybe just a little bit more explanation, if you could, to address why that is. And then a number of the folks in the audience did mention items number 2 and number 3, and maybe you could go through those and explain, just so the other residents understand what they're asking about. Anybody else have any comments? Oh, Mr. Peterson and then Mr. Kalmick. Okay, thank you.
So I definitely would be for getting rid of the overlay in the SB7 area. I mean, that whole area is. But I'd also like to see, I mean, I'd like to see 6 incorporated. That's something we've talked about, this area, this property, and what can, you know, be done, and other properties within the thing. I don't like the fact that we're taking a lot of our industrial stuff we just did an overlay for technical, and now we're making it housing. I know this has to be done, but I just don't understand, and I'm really I always worried when I was on Planning Commission, those bonus densities are horrible. You know, you can't stop them, and they instantly say, hey, we're not going to supply half the parking, and we're going up a floor. And so even though we have those regulations in there, I just would rather that there be nothing over there. So that's
Okay,
my
Mr.
thoughts right
Kalnick.
now.
Well, thank you. I tend to agree with the rest of council. Obviously, I think we, staff did an excellent job on trying to find some alternatives here. I think with the last page of the Planning Commission presentation, one small letter that I think escaped a lot of people was the owner of the Brindle property saying, I don't want this on my property. So I think that pretty much makes it clear that that's going to be very difficult for that site to develop. So I think option 3, I think solves quite a bit of the issues, and I think ameliorates almost everyone's issue going forward. And I think obviously Golden West is a 6-lane arterial, and so I think we're good there. Options, I think both sections for option 6, I think are well worth exploring. I'd like to at least include the public works yard in there in the longer term plan. I think that the 13 acres over on Gothard, I think would be an excellent site as well to try to limit some of the density as you start to move, right? We want subtle density and not abrupt density. And so I think there was one other question that I wanted to at least address is why only in these categories, or why are in these corridors, right?
Mhm.
Like why? And I think you answered that during the PowerPoint, so I just wanted to call attention to the why in these corridors, is that everything else is developed. And most of our city is single-family homes when we have residential, and I think you said in one of your slides specifically that HCD will not let you just upzone existing residential because the probability of it turning is very low. If you can confirm that that's why we're aggregated on these corridors, because that's what's left of either undeveloped, low developed, or high probability turn based on other market conditions.
Yes, I mean, there's a whole list of site criteria that we have to check off. Primarily, we're looking at sites that are vacant, and if they're not vacant, are they unoccupied, have low occupancy, or are they underutilized?
Right, because we have data to show like what's the probability of a site that turns, like that's, we don't operate in a vacuum.
Yes, and to utilize existing residential, 1, that's not likely to turn over, and 2, sometimes the areas that are likely to turn over are because they're naturally the more affordable areas of the city.
Sure.
And HCD doesn't like to see displacement, and now there's laws related to replacement housing, including replacement housing of protected lower income units.
Okay, so that I guess, because there was several speakers that were asking why us, and that I think answers that. So I think that gave
Thank you.
my opinion,
Ms.
staff.
Fulton?
Yeah, just one question to clarify. So I think you had mentioned some challenge to the assessment or allocation of 13,000 plus to Huntington Beach. And could you talk about that just a little bit more? Because I think there was a challenge, right, to that particular number, but that challenge was unsuccessful.
Yes, community development staff with our city attorney's office, we spent a good year challenging the RENA methodology and then the RENA allocation. We must have sent 6 different letters. Our SCAG member from the council at the time participated in the regional council meetings. Once the so that was during the methodology process. Then after the methodology was approved and we got the RENA allocation, we then spent several months working on a lengthy RENA appeal that we took all the way through the process. And ultimately it was denied.
And that RENA appeal is going through another exercise, and that's with OCOG, Orange County Council of Governments, has filed suit against HCD and there are 6 LA cities that have joined that lawsuit. So there already is a legal challenge in place. We already appealed and lost. So that's the next step. So right now, we're bound to comply with RENA to have a compliant housing element, according to staff. So.
If I
Yes,
may,
go ahead.
If I may, Madam Mayor, to really get out of this session, which will be the most helpful, I want to reiterate, our next step is to go to the Planning Commission with a noticed public hearing and to ask them to recommend some actions related to the housing element. And so really what we're looking for, I sort of heard it, but in terms of these options that you're interested in, we'd like to narrow them down and just
sure.
a little bit of discussion so that we're taking kind of the most appetizing options to the council, to the Planning Commission.
Also, too, I'm not going to speak, I'll speak for everybody. We have to digest what you just shared as well. I mean, I think, I understand what you're asking, and we will get to it.
Well, we need that tonight.
Yes,
because,
yes,
okay,
that's right.
I would suggest option 3 and include option 6 if it doesn't slow us down or decertify the housing.
Yes, thank you.
That's what we're hearing.
Option 3,
Okay,
same.
we're going to take a recess, and we'll see you in about, 20 minutes or so. Yes, go ahead, Mr. City Manager.
Mayor,
Excuse me.
Mayor, if I may, just to remind people, everyone who turned in their speaking cards, there will be a public comment session right after the start of the 6 o'clock.
Okay, thank you.